of the Babylon. Up above, valiant defenders were battling to hold the walls. Upon them depended the future existence of this great city with its hundreds of thousands of citizens. Over the walls came the roar of the attacking armies, the yelling of many men, the trampling of thousands of horses, the deafening boom of the battering rams pounding the bronzed gates. In the street behind the gates lounged the spearmen, waiting to defend the entrance should the gate give way. They were but few for the task. The main armies of Babylon were with their king, far away in the east. So far away in the east on the great expedition against the Elamites. No attack upon the city having been anticipated during their absence, the defending forces were small. Unexpectedly, from the north bore down the mighty armies of the Assyrians, and now the walls must hold of Babylon was doomed. About Banzar were great crowds of citizens, white faced and terrified, eagerly seeking news of the battle. With hushed awe, they viewed the stream of wounded and dead being carried or led out of the passageway. Here was the crucial point of attack. After 3 days of circling about the city, the enemy and had suddenly thrown his great strength against this section and this gate. The defenders from the top of the wall fought off the climbing platforms and scaling ladders of the attackers with arrows, burning oil, and if any reached the top spears against the defenders. Thousands of enemies archers poured a deadly barrage of arrows. Old Banjar had the vantage point for news. He was closest to the conflict and first to hear of each fresh ripples of the frenzied attackers. An elderly merchant crowded close to him, his pulsed hands quivering. Tell me, he pleaded. They cannot get in. My sons are with the good kings. There is no one to protect my old wife. My goods, they will steal all. My food, they will leave nothing. We are old, too old to defend ourselves, too old for slaves. We shall starve, we shall die. Tell me, they cannot get in. Calm thyself, good merchant. The guard responded. The walls of Babylon are strong. Go back to the bazaar and tell your wife that the walls will protect you and all of your as possessions as safety as they protect the rich treasures of the king. Keep close to the wall, lest the arrows flying over strike you. A woman with the babe in arms took the old man's place as he withdrew. Sergeant, what news from the top? Tell me truly that I may reassure my poor husband. He lies with fever from the terrible wounds, yet insists upon his armor and his spear to protect me. Who am I with child? Terrible, he says with he ter- Terrible, he says, will be the vengeful lust of our enemies should they break in. Be thou of good heart, thou mother that is and is again be to be. The walls of Babylon will protect you and your babes. They are high and strong. Hear ye not the yells of our valiant defenders as they empty the cauldrons of the burning oil upon the ladder scalers. Yes, that do I hear, and also the roar of the battering rams, rams that do hammer at our gate. Back to thy husband. Tell him the gates are strong and withstand the rams. Also that the scalers climb the wall, but to receive the waiting spear thrust. Watch they watch thy way and hasten behind your buildings. Banjar stepped aside to clear the passage for heavily armed reinforcements. As with clanking bronze shields and heavy tread, they tramped by. A small girl plucked at his girdle. Girdle. Tell me, please, soldier, are we safe? She pleaded. I hear the awful noises. I see the men all bleeding. I am so frightened. What will become of what will become of our family, of my mother, a little brother, and the baby? The grim old championer blinked his eyes and thrust forward his chin as he beheld the child. Be not afraid, little one, he reassured her. The walls of Babylon will protect you and mother and your little brother and the baby. It was for the safety of such as that the good news Queen Semiramis built over them over 100 years ago. Never have they been broken through. Go back and tell your mother and little brother and the baby that the walls of Babylon will protect them and they need no have fear. They need have no fear. Day after day, old Banza stood at his post and watched the reinforcement file up at the passageway, theirs to stay and fight until wounded or dead they came together once more. Around him, unceasingly crowded the throngs of frightened citizens eagerly seeking to learn if the walls would hold. To all he gave his answer with the fine dignity of an old soldier: the walls of Babylon will protect you. For 3 weeks and 5 days, the attack waged with scarcely ceasing violence. Harder and grimmer said the jaw of Banzar as the passage behind, wet with blood of the many wounded, was churned into mud by the never ceasing streams of men passing up and staggering down. Each day the slaughtered attackers piled up in heaps before the wall. Each night they were carried back and buried by their comrades. Upon the fifth night of the fourth week of the clamor without diminished. The first streaks of daylight illuminating the plains disclosed great clouds of dust raised by the retreating armies. A mighty shout went up from the defenders. There was no mistaking its meaning. It was repeated by the waiting troops behind the walls. It was echoed by the citizens upon the streets. It swept over the city with the violence of a storm. People rushed from the house. The streets were jammed with a throbbing mob. The pent up fear of weeks found an outlet in the wild chorus of joy from the top of high tower of the temple of Bel burst forth the flames of victory. Skyward the column floated the column of blue smoke to carry the message far and wide. The walls of Babylon had once again repulsed a mighty and vicious foe determined to loot her rich treasures and to ravish and enslave her citizen. Babylon endured century after century because it was fully protected. It could not afford to be otherwise. The walls of Babylon were an outstanding example of man's need and desire for protection. This desire is inherent in the human race. It is just as strong today as it ever was, but we have developed broader and better plans to accomplish the same purpose. In this day, behind the impregnable walls of insurance, saving accounts, and dependable investment, we can guard ourselves against the unexpected tragedies, tra- tra- tragedy, tragedies, these tragedies, unexpected tragedies that may enter any door and seat themselves before any fireside. We cannot afford to be without adequate protection. Chapter 8: The Camel Trader of Babylon. The hungrier one becomes, the cleaner one's mind works. The hungrier one becomes, the clearer one's mind works. Also, the more sensitive one becomes the order of food. Turkot, the son of Azure, certainly thought so. For 2 whole days he had tasted no food except two small figs purloined from the wall of garden. Not another could he grab before the angry woman rushed forth and chased him down the street. Her shrill cries were still ringing in his ear as he walked through the marketplace. They helped him to retrain his restless fingers from snatching the tempting fruits from the baskets of the market woman. Never before had he realized how much food was brought to the markets of Babylon and how good is it smelled. House, perhaps in him. Without the copper, he knew all too well how unwelcome he would be. In his abstraction, he unexpectedly found himself face to face with the one man he wished most to avoid, the tall, bony figure of Dawasir, the camel trader. Of all the friends and others from whom he had borrowed some sons, Dawasir made him the most uncomfortable because of his failure to keep his promises to repay promptly. Dawasir's face lighted up at the sight of him. Huh, this target just the place I have been seeking, and he might repay the 2 pieces of copper which I lent him a moons ago. Also a piece of silver which I lent to him before that. We are well met. I can make good use of the coins days every day. But say, boy, what say? Turkot stuttered and his face flushed. He had not in his empty stomach to nerve him to argue with the outspoken Dabasir. I am sorry, very sorry, he mumbled weakly, but this day I have neither the copper nor the silver with which I could repay. Then I get it, the Basir insisted. Surely thou canst get hold of a few coppers and a few of silvers to repay the generosity of an old friend of thy father who aided the whence thou was in need. This because ill fortune does pursue me that I cannot repay. Uh, All fortune, wouldst blame the gods for thine own weakness. All fortune pursues every man who thinks more of borrowing than of repaying. Come with me, boy, while I eat. I am hungry and I would tell thee a story. Tale. Turgut flinched from the brutal frankness of the Basir, but here at least was an invitation to enter the coveted doorway of the eating house. Dawasir pushed him up to a far corner of the room where they seated themselves upon small rugs. When Koskor, the proprietor, appeared smiling, the Basir addressed him with the usual freedom. Fat lizard of the desert, bring to me a leg of the goat, brown with much juice and bread and all over the vegetables, for I am hungry and a jug of water have it cooled, for the days it is hot. Turgut heart sank. Must he sit here and drink water while he watched this man devour an entire goat leg? He said nothing. He thought of nothing he could say. Dawasi, however, knew so. Dawasi, however, knew no such thing as silence, smiling and waving his hand good naturedly to other customer. All to him knew him. He continued, I did hear from the traveller just returned from Urfa of a certain rich man who has a piece of stone cut so thin that one can look through it. He put it he was permitted the world from what it really is, and the tale I am about to tell relates how I came to see it in its right color once more. Dabasir will tell a tale, whispered a neighboring diner to his neighbor, and dragged his rug close. Other diners brought their food and crowded in a semicircle. They crunched noisily in the ears of Tarka, then brushed him with their meaty bones. He alone was without food. Dabasi did not offer to share with him or even motion him a small corner of the hard bread that was broken off and had fallen from the platter to the floor. Fourth leg relates to my early life and how I came to be a camel trader. Didn't anyone know that? I once was a slave in Syria. A murmur of surprise ran through the audience, to which Dawasi listened with satisfaction. When I was a young man, continued Dawasi after another vicious on, onslaught of the goat's leg, I learned the trade of my father, the making of saddles. I worked with him in his shop and took to myself a wife. Being young and not greatly skilled, I could earn, but keepers would trust me to pay later, even though I could no pay at the time. Being young and without experience, I did not know that he who spends more than he earns is sowing the winds of needless, the whirlwind of the trouble and humiliation. So I indulged my whims for fine raiment and bought luxuries of my good wife and our home. Beyond my debts, my life became miserable. Could not repay them either. Another city where a young man might have better chances. From this, I fell in with a set of likable robbers who scoured, scoured the desert once. Such deeds were unworthy of the son of my father, but I was seeing the world through a colored stone and did not realize to what degradation I had fallen. We met with success on the way on our first trip, capturing a rich haul of gold and silk and valuable merchandise. This loot we took of Ginny and squandered. The first time we were not so fortunate. Just after we had made our capture, we were attacked by the to Damascus, where we were stripped to our clothing and sold as slaves. I was purchased for 2 pieces of silver by a Syrian desert chief, with my hair shorn but a loth coin to wear. I was with me before his 4 wives and told them they could have me for a unuch. Then indeed did I realize the hopelessness of my situation. These men of desert were fierce and warlike. I was subject to their will without weapons or means of escape. Fearful I stood as those 4 women looked over me. I wondered if I could expect pity from them. Sira, the first wife, was older than the others. Her face was impassive as she looked upon me. I turned from her legs with a little consolation. The next was a contemptuous beauty who gazed at me as indifferently as I had been a worm of the earth. The 2 younger ones tittered as though it were all an exciting joke. It seemed an age that I stood waiting sentence. Each woman appeared willing for the others to decide. Finally, Shira spoke up in a cold voice. Of Unuts we have plenty, but to camel tenders we have few, and they were a worthless lot. Even this day, I would visit my mother who is sick with the fever, and there is no slave I would trust to lead my camel. Ask, ask this slave as he can lead a camel. My master thereupon cautioned me, what know you of camels? Striving to conceal my eagerness, I replied, I can make them kneel. I can load them. I can lead them on long trips without tiring. If needed be, I can repair their trappings. The slave speaks forward enough, observed my master. If thou so desire, Sira, take this man for thy camel's tender. So I was turned over to Sira, and that day I led her camel upon a long journey to her sick mother. I took the occasion to thank her for her intercession and also to tell her that I was not a slave by birth, but the son of freeman and an honorable saddle maker of Babylon. I also told her much of my story. Her comments were disconcerting to me. I pondered much afterwards on what she said. How can you call yourself a free man when your weakness has brought you to this? If a man has in himself the soul of slave, will he not become one? No matter what, he not become respected and honored in his own city in spite of his misfortune. For over a year I was a slave and lived with the slaves, but I could not become as one of them. One day Sira asked me in the even time, asked me in the even time when the other slaves can mingle and enjoy the society of each other, why dost thou sit in tent alone? To which I responded, I am pondering what you have said to me. I wonder if I have the soul of a slave. I cannot join them, so I must sit apart. He married me because of it. Yet he does not desire me. What every woman longs for it to be desired. Because of this, and because I am barren, and I have neither son nor daughter, must I sit apart where I am a man? I would rather die than be such a slave. But the conventions of our tribe make slaves of women. What think thou of me by this time? I asked her suddenly. Have I have I the soul of a man, or have I the soul of a slave? Have you a desire to repay the just debts you owe in Babylon? She parried. Yes, I have the desire, but I see no way. If thou contently let the years slip by and make no effort to repay, then thou hast the contemptible soul of a slave. No man is otherwise who cannot respect himself, and no man can respect himself who does not repay honest debts. Honest debts. Honest debts. But what can I do when am a slave in Syria? Stay a slave in Syria, thou weakling. I am not a weakling, I denied hotly. Then prove it. How? Does not the great king fight his enemies in every way he can and with every force he has? The that are thy enemies. They ran thee of the Babylon. You left them alone, and they grew too strong for being one honored among the towns gone down until thy art as a slave in Syria. Much I thought over the unkind accusations and if I was not to have the chance to use them. 3 days later, a maid of Syria took me to her mistress. My mother is again very sick. In my husband's herd, tie one water skins and saddle bags for a long journey. The maid will give you the food at the kitchen tent. I packed the camel, wondering much at the quantity of provisions the maid provided, for the mother dwelt less than a day's journey away. The maid rode the rear camel, which followed, and I led the camel out of my mistress. When we reached our mother's house, it was dark. Sira dismissed the maid and said to me, Dabasir, how hast thou the soul of a free man or the soul of a slave? The soul of a free man, I insisted. Now is thy chance to prove it. Thy master had imbibed deeply, and his thieves are in a stupor. Take then these camels and make thy escape. Here in this bag is raiment of thy master to disguise thee. I will say thou stole the camels and ran away while I visited my sick mother. Thou hast the soul of a queen, I told her. Much do I wish that I might lead thee out to happiness. Happiness, she responded. Thy own way, and may the gods further urging, but thanked her warmly and was away into the night. I alone, but struck out. I travelled, and all that next day meted inhabitable as their ways slowly and fairly along. This inhospitable land. Day after day we plodded along. Food and water gave out. The heat of the sun was merciless. At the end of the ninth day, I slid from the back of my mount with that feeling that I was too weak to ever remount, and I would surely die, lost in the abandoned country. I stretched out upon the ground and slept, not waking until the first gleam of daylight. I sat up and looked about me. There was a coolness in the morning air. My camels lay dejected not far away. About me was a vast waste of broken country covered with rock and sand of thorny things. No sign of water, not to eat for man's or camel. Could it be that in the peaceful quiet I faced my end? My mind was clearer than I had ever been. My body now seemed a little importance. My parched and bleeding lips, my dry and swollen tongue, my empty stomach, all had lost their supreme agonies of the day before. I looked across into the uninviting distance, and once again came to me the question, have I the soul of a slave or the soul of a free man? Then the clearness. I realized that if I had the soul of a slave, I should give up, lie down in the desert and die, a fitting end for a runaway slave. But if I had the slave of a free man, what then? Surely I would force my way back to Babylon, repay the people who had trusted me, bring happiness to my wife who truly loved me, and bring peace and contentment to my parents. I saw the things that I must do. First, I would go back to Babylon and face every man to whom I owed an unpaid debt. I should tell them that after years and I as fast as the God would permit, as fast as the God would permit. Next, I should make a home for my wife and become a citizen of whom my parents should be proud. My debts were my enemies, but the men I owed were my friends, for they had trusted me and believed in me. I staggered weakly to my feet. What mattered hunger? What mattered thirst? They were but incidents which surged the soul of a free man going back to conquer his enemies and reward his. With the great efforts, after many attempts, they gained their feet. With pitiful perseverance, they pushed on the ground to the north, and where something within me said we would find Babylon. We found water. We passed into a mere fertile country where were grass and fruit. We found the trail of Babylon because the soul of a free man looks at life as a series of problems to be solved and solves them. But a slave. How about thee? How about thee, Tarkad? Those thy empty stomach make thy head exceedingly clear. Art ready to take the road that leads back to self-respect. Canst thou see the world in its true color? Hast thou the desire to pay thy honest debts, however many they may be, and once again be as man respected in Babylon? Moisture came to the eyes of the youth. He rose eagerly to his knees. Thou hast shown me a vision already. I feel the soul of a free man surge within me. But how I fared upon your return, questioned an interested listener. Where the determination is, the way can be found. I now had the determination, so I set out to find a way. First, most of them met me gladly. Several reviled me, but others offered to help me. One indeed gave me the very help I needed. It was Mathon, the gold lender. Learning that I had been a camel tender in animals for the great expedition. With him, my knowledge of camels I put to good use. Gradually, I was able to repay every copper and every piece of silver. Then at last, I could hold up my head and feel that I was an honorable man among men. Again, Dabasi turned to his food. Koskor, thou snail, he called loudly to be heard in the kitchen. The food is cold. Bring me more meat fresh from the roasting. Bring thou also a very large portion for Turkad, the son of my old friend, who is hungry and shall eat with me. So ended the tale of Dabasi, the camel trader of old Babylon. He found his own soul when he realized the great truth. The truth has been known and used by a wise man long before his time. It has led men of all ages out of difficulties and into successes, and it will continue to do for those who have the wisdom to understand its magic power. It is for any man to use who reads this line. Where the determination is, the way can be found. Oh my God! जहाँ पर भी दृढ़ निश्चयता है, वहाँ पे रास्ता ढूंढा जा सकता है, पाया जा सकता है. Where the determination is, the interesting line which was at the end of a chapter. I don't know which chapter it was. Let me find out. Mm, which chapter at the end of I have read. Chapter 9. Let's see how many chapters are there in this book. There are 10 chapters. Okay, I am on the 9th chapter. The clay tablets from Babylon. Saint Saint Swithin's College, Nottingham University, Newark-on-Trent, Nottingham. Professor Franklin Caldwell care of British scientific expedition Hilla, Mesopotamia, October 21, 1934. My dear professor, the five clay tablets relating their inscription. I should have answered your letter at once, but to your careful use of one expects the dim and distant past. Instead, it discloses the problem of the person named Devasi to pay off his debts. One realizes that conditions upon his old worlds have not changed as much in 5,000 years as one might expect. It's odd, but these old inscriptions rather rage me. As the students say, being a college professor, I am I am supposed to be thinking human being possessing a working knowledge of most subjects. Yet here comes this old chap out of the dust-covered ruins of Babylon to offer a way I had never heard of to pay off my debts and at the same time acquire gold to jingle in my wallet. Pleasant Mrs. Myers are planning to try out his plans upon our own affairs, which could be much improved. Wishing you the wishing you the best of luck in your worthy undertaking and wealthy eagerly another opportunity to assist. I am yours sincerely, Alfred H. Shrewsbury, Department of Archaeology. Tablet number one. Now, when the moon becomes full, I, Devasil, who am but recently returned from slavery in Syria, with the determination to repay my many just debts and become a man of means worthy of respect in my native city of Babylon, do here engrave upon the clay of a permanent record of my affairs to guide and assist me in carrying through my high desires. Under the wise advice of my good friend Mathan, the God lender, I am determined to follow an exact plan that he doth say will lead my honorable man out of debt into means and self respect. This plan includes three purposes, which are my hope and desire. First, the plan doth provide for my future prosperity. Therefore, one tenth of all I earn shall be set aside as my own to keep. For Mathan speaketh wisely when he saith, the man who keepeth in his purse both gold and silver, that he need not spend is good to his family and loyal to his king. The man who hath but a few coppers in his purse is indifferent to his family and indifferent to his king. But the man who hath not in his purse is unkind to his family and is disloyal to his king, for his own heart is bitter. Therefore, the man who wisheth to achieve must have coin that he may keep to jingle in his purse, that he have in his heart love for his family and loyalty to his king. Second, the plant doth provide that I shall support and clothe my good wife who hath returned to me with loyalty from the house of her father. For Mathan doth say that to take care of a faithful wife putteth self-respect into the heart of a man and addeth strength and determination to his purposes. Therefore, seven tenths of all I earn shall be used to provide a home, clothes to wear, and food to eat, with the extra bit to spend, that our lives be not lacking in pleasure and enjoyment. But he thought further enjoin the greatest care that we spend not greater than seven tenths of what I earn for these worthy purposes. Herein lieth the success of our plan. I must live upon this portion and never use more nor buy what I may not pay for out of this portion. Tablet number two, second. Tablet number second. Third, the plan got provide that out of my earnings my debt shall be paid. Therefore, each time the moon is full, 2/10 of all I have earned shall be divided honorably and fairly among those who have trusted me and to whom I am indebted. Thus, in due time, will all my indebtedness be surely paid. Therefore, do I here engrave the name of every man to whom I indebted and the honest amount of my debt. Faharu the cloth weaver, second silver, six no. Faharu the cloth weaver, two silver, six copper. Sinjar the couch maker, one silver. Ahmar, my friend, three silver, one copper. Zanzar, my friend, four silver, seven copper. Askamir, my friend, one silver, three copper. Harinsir, the jewel maker, six silver, two copper. Diarbekir, my father's friend, four silver, one copper. Alkahar, the house owner, 14 silver. Methan, the gold lender, 9 silver. Barzik, the farmer, 1 silver, 7 copper. From here on, disintegrated cannot be deciphered. Table number third. To these creditors do I owe in total 119 pieces of silver and 141 pieces of copper, because I did owe this sum and saw no way to repay. In my folly, I did permit my wife to return to her father and did leave my native city and seek easy wealth elsewhere, only to find disaster to see myself sold into a degradation of slavery. Now that Maton doth show me how I can repay my debts in small sums of my earnings, do I realize that great extent of my folly in running away from the result of my extravagances. Therefore, here I visited my creditors and explained to them that I have no resources with which to pay except my ability to earn, that I intended to apply with tenth of all I earn upon my indebtedness evenly and honestly. This much and can I pay, but no more. Therefore, if they be patient, in time my obligations will be paid in full. Ahmar, whom I thought my best friend, reviled me bitterly, and I left him in humiliation. Bayarjik, the farmer, pleaded me that I pay him first, as he did badly need help. Alkahad, the house owner, was indeed disagreeable and insisted that he would make me trouble unless I didn't soon settle in full with him. All the rest willingly accepted my proposal. Therefore, am I more determined than ever to carry it through, being convinced that it is easier to pay one's just debt to avoid them. Even though I cannot meet the needs and demands of a few of my creditors, I will deal impartially with all. Table number fourth. Against the moon shines full. I have worked hard with the free mind. My good wife had supported my intentions to pay my creditors. Because of our wise determination, I have earned during the past moon, buying camels of sound wind and good legs for Nabatud the sum of 19th pieces of silver. This I have never divided according to the plan. 1/10 I have set aside to keep myself as my own. 7/10 I divided with my good wife to pay for our living. 2/10 have I divided among my creditors as evenly as could be done in coppers. I did not see Azhar but left it with his wife. Bayarzik was so pleased he would kiss my hand. Old Alkahad alone was grouchy and said I must pay faster. To which I replied that if I were permitted to be well fed and not worried, that alone would enable me to pay faster. All the other thanked me. Indebtedness is reduced by almost lighter than it hath been for a long time. Science full. I have worked hard but with poor success. Few camels have I been able to buy. Only seven only 7 pieces of silver have I earned. Nevertheless, my good wife and I have stood by plans even though we have bought no new raiment and eaten little but herbs. Again, I paid ourselves 1/10 of 11 pieces, while we lived upon 7/10. I was surprised when Ajmahar commanded my payment, even though small. So did Bayezid. Alkahad flew into rage but told to give back his portion if he did not wish it. He became reconciled. The other, as before, were content again. The moon shines full, and I am greatly rejoiced. I intercepted for 42 pieces, so we have dined well on but did not protest, which is ours to each time I paid to myself 1/10 of all I earned each time. My good wife and I have in my purse. I now have 21 pieces of silver, and it maketh my head to stand straight upon my shoulders and maketh me proud to walk among my friends. My wife keepeth well our home is becomingly becomingly gowned. We are happy to live together. The plan of untold value hath it not made an honorable man of an ex-slave. Table number fifth. Table number fifth. Table number fifth. Again the moon shines full, and I remember that it is long since I carved upon the day. 12 months 12 moons in truth have come and gone, but this day I will not neglect my records, because upon this day I have paid the last of my debts. This is the day upon which my good wife and my thankful self celebrate with a great feasting that our definition hath been achieved. Many things occurred upon my final visit to my creditors that I shall remember. Ahmar begged my forgiveness for his unkind words and said that I was one of all others he most desired for a friend. Old Alkahad is not so bad after all, for he said, "Thou wert once a piece of soft clay to be pressed and molded by any hand that touched thee, but now thou art a piece of bronze capable of holding an edge. If thou needest silver or gold at any time, come to me." Nor is he the only one who behold me in high regard. Many all speak differentially to me. My good wife looketh upon me with a light in her smiles, and that doth make a man have confidence in himself. Yet it is the plan that hath made my success. It hath enabled to pay all my debts and to jingle both gold and silver in my purse. I do commend it to all who wishes to get ahead, for if is myself finished with it, for am I convinced that if I follow it further on Trent, Nottingham, November 7th, 1936. Professor Franklin Caldwell, care of British Scientific Expedition, Hilla, Mesopotamia. My dear Professor, my dear Professor, it is in your further digging into those ruins of Babylon You encounter the ghost of former resident an old camel trader named Dabasir. Do me a favor, tell him that his scribbling upon those clay so long ago has earned for him the lifelong gratitude of a couple of college folks back here in England. You will possibly remember my writing a years ago that Mrs. Shrewsbury and myself intended to try his plan for getting out of debt and at the same time having gold to jingle. You may have guessed, even though we tried to keep it from our friend. Our desperate straits, we were frightfully humiliated for years by a lot of out old debts and worried sick for some of the trades people might start a scandal that would force me to out of the college. We paid and paid every shilling we could squeeze out of income, but it was hardly enough to hold things even. Besides, we were forced to do all the buying where we could get further credit regardless of higher costs. It developed into one of those vicious cycles that grow worse instead of better. Our struggles were getting hopeless. We could not move to less costly rooms because we owed the landlord. There did not appear to be anything we could do improve our situation. Then here comes the your acquaintance, the old camel trader from Babylon, with a plan to do just what he wishes to accomplish. He jolly well stirred us to a fellow his system. We made a list of all debts that I took it around and showed it to everyone we owed. I explained how it was simply impossible for me to ever pay them the way things were going along. They could readily see this themselves from the figures. Then I explained that the only way I saw to pay in full was to set aside 20% of my income each month to be divided pro rata, which would pay them in full in a little over 2 years. That in the meantime, we would go on a cash basis and give them a further benefit of our cash purchases. Therefore, were really quite decent. Our greengrocer, a wise old chap, put in a way that helped to bring around the rest. If you pay for all you buy, and then pay some on what you owe, this is better that you have done. For ye and paid down the account none of in the 3 years. Finally, I secured all their names to an agreement binding them not to molest us as long as 20% of income was paid regularly. Then we began scheming on how to live upon 70%. We were determined to keep that extra 10% to jingle. The thoughts of silver and possibly gold was most alluring. It was like having an adventure to make the change. We enjoyed figuring this way and that to live comfortably upon the remaining 70%. We started with rent and managed to secure a fair reduction. Now we put our favorite brands of tea and such under suspicion and were agreeably surprised how often we could purchase superior qualities at less cost. It is it is too long a story for a little letter, but anyhow, it did not prove difficult. We managed and write cheerfully at that. What a relief it proved to have our affairs in such a shape we were no longer persecuted by past due accounts. I must not neglect, however, to tell you about that extra 10% we were supposed to jingle. Well, we did jingle for it some time. Now don't laugh too much. You see that it is the sporty part. It is the real fun to start accumulating money that you do not want to spend. There is more pleasure in running up such a surplus than there could be in spending it. After we had jingled to our heart's content, we found a more profitable use for it. We took up an investment upon which we could pay that 10% each month. This is proving to be the most satisfying parts of our regeneration. It is the first thing we pay out of my check. There is a most gratifying sense of security to know our investment is growing steadily. By the time my teaching days are over, it should be snug sum, large enough so that the kingdom will take care of us from then on. All this out of my same old check, difficult to believe, yet absolutely true. All our debts being gradually paid, and at the same time, our investment increasing. Beside, we get along financially even better than before. Who would believe there could be such an indifference in result between following a financial plan and just drifting along? At the end of the next year, when all our old bills shall have been paid, we will have more to pay upon our investment beside some extra for travel. We are determined never again to permit our living expenses to exceed 70% of our income. Now you can understand why we would like to extend our personal thanks to that old chap whose plan saved us from our hell on earth. He knew he had been through it all. He wanted others to benefit from his own bitter experiences. That is why he spent tedious hours, tedious hours carving his message upon the clay. He had a real message for fellow sufferers, a message so important that after 5,000 years it has risen out of ruins of Babylon, just as true and just as vital as the day it was buried. Yours sincerely, Alfred H. Shrewsbury, Department of Archaeology. Okay, so this is the final chapter. This is the final chapter of the book, The Richest Man in Babylon. At the head of his caravan proudly rode Sarunada, the merchant prince of Babylon. He liked fine clothes and wore rich and becoming robes. He liked fine animals and sat easily upon his spirited Arabian stallion. To look at him, one would hardly have guessed his advanced years. Certainly, they would not have suspected that he was inwardly troubled. The journey from Damascus is a long and hardship of the desert many. Thus he minded not. The Arab tribes are fierce and eager to loot rich caravans, rich caravans. These he feared not, for his many fleet mounted guards were a self-protection. About the youth at his side, whom he was bringing from Damascus, was he disturbed. This was Hadan Gula. This was Hadan Gula, the grandson of his partner of the other years, Arad Gula, to whom he felt he owed a debt of gratitude which could never be repaid. He would like to do something for his grandson, but the more he considered this, the more difficult it seemed because of the youth himself. Eyeing the young man's ring and earrings, he thought to himself, he thinks jewels are for men. Still, his grandfather's strong face, but his grandfather wore no such gaudy robes. Yet I sought him to come, hoping I might help him get a start for himself and get away from the wreck his father has made of their inheritance. Inheritance. Hadangula broke. Hadangula broke in upon his thoughts. Why dost thou work so hard, riding always with thy caravan upon its long journeys? Dost thou never take time to enjoy life? Sarunada smiled. To enjoy life, he repeated. What wouldst thou to enjoy life if thou wert Sarunada? What is Sarunada here? If I had wealth equal to thine, I would live I would live like a prince. Never across the hot desert would I ride. I would wear the richest of robes and the rarest of jewels. That would be a life to my likings, a life worth living. Both men laughed. Thy grandfather wore no jewels. Sarunada spoke before he thought, then continued jokingly, wouldst thou leave no time for work? Work was made for slaves, Hadun Kula responded. Sarunada bit his lip but made no reply, riding in silence until the trail led them to the slope. Here he reined his mount and pointing to the green valley far away. See, there is a valley. Look far down, and thou canst faintly see the walls of Babylon. The tower is the temple of Bel. If thine eyes are sharp, thou mayst even see the smoke from the eternal five upon its crest. So that is Babylon. Always I have longed to see the wealthiest city in all the walls. Hadangula commented, Babylon, where my grandfather started his fortune, would he were still alive. We would not be sorely pressed. Why wish his spirit to linger on earth beyond its allotted time? Thou and thy father can well carry on his good work. Alas of us, neither has his gift. Father and myself know not his secret for attracting his golden shackles. Sarunala did not reply but gave rein to his mount and rode thoughtfully down the trail to the valley. Behind them followed the caravan in a cloud of reddish dust. Some time later, they reached the king's highway and turned south through the irrigated farm. Three old men plowing a field caught Sarunada's attention. They seemed strangely familiar. How ridiculous! One does not pass a field after 40 years and find the same man plowing there. Yet sometimes within him said they were the same. One with uncertain grip held the plow, the other laboriously plodded beside the oxen, ineffectually beating them with their barrel staves to keep them pulling. 40 years ago he had envied these men. How gladly he would have exchanged places. But what a difference now! With pride he looked back at his trailing caravan, well chosen camels and donkeys, loaded high with valuable goods from Damascus. All this was but one of his possessions. He pointed to the plowers, saying, still plowing the same field where they were 40 years ago. They look it, and why thinkest thou they are the same? I saw them there, Sarunara replied. Recollections were racing rapidly through his mind. Why could he not bury the past and live in the present? Then he saw, as in a picture, the smiling face of Arad Gula. The barrier between himself and the cynical youth beside him dissolved. But how could he help such a superior youth with his spendthrift ideas and bejeweled hands? Work he could offering plenty to willing workers, but not for men who considered themselves too good for work. Yet he owned it to Aradgula to do something, not a half-hearted attempt. He and Aradgula had never been done with things that way. They were not that sort of men. A plan came almost in a flash. There were objections. He must consider his own family and his own standing. It would rather be cruel. It would hurt. Being a man of quick decisions, he waived objections and decided to act. Wouldst thou be interested in hearing how thou worthy grandfather and myself joined in the partnership with which proved so profitable? He questioned. Why not just tell me how thou madest the golden shackle? This is all I needed to know, the young man parried. Sarunara ignored the reply and continued, we start with those men plowing. I was no older than thou. As the column of men in which I marched approached, good old Megiddo, the farmer scoffed at the slip-shod way in which they plowed. Megiddo was chained next to me. Look at the lazy fellows, he protested. The plow holder makes no effort to plow deeper, nor do the beaters keep the oxen in the furrow. How can they expect to raise a good crop with poor plowing? Didn't thou say Medigdo was changed to thee? Hardankula asked in surprise. Yes, with bronze colors about our necks and a length of heavy chains between us. Next to him was Jabado, the sheep thief. I had known him in Harroon. At the end was a man we called Pirate because he told us that not his name. We judged him as a sailor as he had entwined serpents tattooed upon his chest. In, in sailor fashion, the column was made up that so the men could walk in force. Thou wert chained as a slave, Adangula asked incredulously. Did not thy grandfather tell thee I was once a slave? He often spoke of thee but never hinted of this. He was a man thou couldst trust with innermost secret, though thou art a man I may trust. Am I know right? Sarunada looked at him squarely in the eyes. Thou mayest rely upon my silence, but I am amazed. Tell me how didst thou came to be a slave? Sarunada shrugged his shoulders. Any man may find himself a slave. It was gaining gaming house and barely beer that brought me disaster. I was the victim of my brother's indiscretions. In a brawl, he killed his friend. I was bonded to by my fattier, desperate to keep my brother from being persecuted under the law. When my father could not raise the silver to free me, she in anger sold me to the slave dealer. What a shame and injustice, Hadangula protested. But tell me, how didst thou regain freedom? We shall come to that, but not yet. Let us continue my tale. As we passed, my plovers jeered at us. One did top his raised and hat and bow low, calling out, Welcome to Babylon, guests of the king. He waits for thee on the city wall where the banquet is spread, mud bricks and onion soup. With that they laughed uproariously. Pirate flew into a rage and cursed them roundly. What to do those men mean by the king awaiting us on the walls? I asked him. To the city walls, ye must to carry bricks until the back breaks. Maybe they beat thee to that before it breaks. They won't beat me, it will kill them. Then Magneto spoke up. It does not make sense to me to talk to of masters, waiting willings, hard working slaves to that, and master like good slaves and treat them well. Who who wants to work hard? Commented Jabado. Those flowers are wise fellows. They are not breaking their backs, just letting on as if they be. Thou can't get ahead by shirking. Medicdo protested. If thou plough a hectare, that's a good day's work, and any master knows it. But when thou plough only a half, thou shrink shirking. I don't shirk. I like to work and I like to do good work. Good work. For work is the best friend I have never known. It has brought me all the good things I have had. My farm and cows and crops and everything. Yea, and where these things now? Scoffed Jabado. I figure it pays better to be smart and get by without working. You watch Jabado. If we are sold to the wolves, he will be carrying the water. He will be carrying the water bag or some easy job when thou who like to work will be breaking the high back carrying bricks. He loved his silly laugh. Terror gripped me that night. I could not sleep. I crowded close to the guard rope, and when the others slept, I attracted the attention of Godoso, who was doing the first guard watch. He was one of those brigand Arabs, the sort of rogue who, if robbed thee of thy purse, would think he must also cut thy throat. Tell me, Godoso, I whispered, when we get to Babylon, will, will, will we be sold to the wolves? I want to know, he questioned cautiously. Canst thou not understand? I pleaded. I am young, I want to live, I don't want to be worked or beaten to death. Death on the walls. Is there any chance for me to get a good master? He whispered back, I tell something, thou good fellow, give good also no trouble. Most time we go first to slave market. Listen now. When buyers come, tell them good workers like to work hard for good master. Make them want to buy. You not make em buy. Next day you carry brick. Mighty hard work. After he walked away, I lay in the warmth of sand, looking up at the stars and thinking about work. What Medico had said about it being his best friend made me wonder if it would be my best friend. Certainly, it would be it if it helped me out of this. When Mendigo awoke, I whispered my good news to him. It was our one ray of hope as we marched towards Babylon. Late in the afternoon, we approached the walls and could see the lines of men like black ants climbing up and down the steep diagonal path. As we drew closer, we were amazed at the thousands of men working. Some were digging in the moat, others mixed up the dirt into mud bricks. Number the greatest number were carrying the bricks in large baskets up those steep trails to the masons. Overseers cursed the laggards and cracked bullocks' whips over the back of those who failed to keep in line. Poor, worn out fellows were seen to stagger and fall beneath their heavy baskets, unable to rise again. If the lads failed to bring them to their field, they were pushed to the side of the path and left writhing in agony. Soon they would be dragged down to join other caravan bodies beside the roadways to await unsanctified graves. As I beheld the ghastly sight, I stuttered. So this was what I waited. My father's son, if he failed at the slave market, Godoso had been right. We were taken through the gates of the city to the slave prison and next morning marched to the pens in the market. Here the rest of men huddled in fear, and only the whips of our guard could keep them moving so the buyers could examine them. Medicto and myself eagerly talked to every man who permitted us to address him. The slave dealer brought soldiers from the king's guard who shackled pirate and brutally beat him when he protested as they led him away. I felt sorry for him. Medic that work would be to be in the future. Some men hated out of what a good house thou build, then who cares if the beams are heavy or it is far away from well to carry the waters for the plaster. Promise me, boy, if thou get a master, work for him as hard as thou canst. If he does not appreciate all thou do, never mind. Remember, work well done does good to the man who does it. It makes him a better man. He stopped as a burly farmer came to the enclosure and looked at us critically. Medicdo asked about his farm and crops, soon convincing him that he would be a valuable man. After violent bargaining with the slave dealer, the farmer drew at a fat purse from beneath his robe, and soon Medicdo had followed his new master out of sight. A few other men were sold during this morning. At night, Godoso confided to me that the dealer was disgusted and would not stay over another night, but would take all who remained at sundown to the king's buyer. I was becoming desperate when a fat, good natured man walked up to the wall and inquired if there was a baker among us. I approached him, saying, why should a good baker like thyself seek another baker of inferior ways? Would it not be easier to teach a willing man like thyself skilled ways? Look at me, I am young, strong, and like to work. Give me a chance, and I will do my best to earn gold and silver for thy purse. He was impressed by my willingness and began bargaining with the dealer who had never noticed me since he had bought me, but now waxed eloquent of my abilities, good health, and good disposition. I felt like a fat ox being sold to a butcher. At last, much to my joy, the deal was closed. I followed my new master away, thinking I was luckiest man in Babylon. My new home was much to my liking. Nana Ned, my master, taught me how to grind the barley in the stone bowl that stood in the courtyard, how to build the fire in the oven, and then how to grind very fine the sesame flour for the honey cakes. I had a couch in the shed where his grain was stored. The old slave housekeeper Swasti fed me well and was pleased as the way I helped her with her heavy tasks. Here was the chance I had longed for to I had longed for to make myself valuable to my masters, and I hoped to find a way to earn my freedom. I asked Nana Ned to show me how to knead the bread and to bake. This he did, much pleased at my willingness. Later, when I could do this well, I asked him to show me how to make the honey cakes, and soon I was doing all the baking. My master was glad to be idle, but Swasti shook her head in disapproval. No work to do is bad for any man, she declared. I felt it was my time for me to think in of a way by which to earn coins to buy my freedom. As the baking was finished at noon, I thought Nana Ned would approve if I found profitable employment for the afternoons and might share my earnings with me. Then the thought came to me: why not bake more of the honey cakes and peddle them to hungry men upon the street of the city? I presented my plan to Nana Ned this way: if I can use my afternoons and after the baking is finished to earn for the coins, would it be only fair for thee to share my earnings with me, that I might have money of my own to spend for those things which every man desires and needs? Fair enough, he admitted. When I told him of my plans to peddle our honey cakes, he was well pleased. Here is what we will do, he suggested. Thou sellest them at two for a penny, then half of pennies will be mine to pay for the flour and the honey, and the wood to bake them. One of the rest I shall take half, and thou shalt keep half. I was much pleased by his generous offer that I might keep for myself one fourth of my slaves. That night I worked late to make a tray upon on which to display them. Nana Ned gave me one of his worn robes that I might look well, and Swasti helped me to patch it and wash it clean. The next day I baked an extra supply of honey cakes. They looked brown and tempting upon the tray as I went along the street loudly calling my wares. At first no one seemed interested and I became discouraged. I kept on, and later in the afternoon, as men became hungry, the cake began to sell and soon my tray was empty. Nana Ned was well pleased with my success and gladly paid me my shares. I was delighted to own pennies. Medicdo had been right when he said a master appreciated good work from his slaves. That night I was so excited over my success I could hardly sleep, and he was a rug merchant and sold to the housewives going from one end of the city to other, accompanied by a donkey load. One day that I shall always remember. I like thy cakes, but I like thy cakes, boy, but better still I like the fine enterprise which thou offerest them. Such spirits can carry thee far on the road to success. But how canst thou understand, Hadangula, what such words of encouragement could mean to a slave boy, lonesome in a great city, struggling with all the head he had in him to find a way out of his humiliation, humiliation. As the months went by, I continued to add pennies, pennies, penny, pennies, pennies, penis, pennies. I continued to add pennies to my purse. Penny, 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 pennies, pennies, pennies. I continue to add pennies to my purse. It began to have a comforting weight upon my belt. Work was proving Work was providing to be my best friend, just as Medicdo had said. I was happy, but Swasti was worried. Thy master, I fear to have him spend so much time at the gaming house. I was overjoyed one day to meet my friend Medicdo upon the street. He was leading three donkeys loaded with vegetables to the market. I am doing mighty well, he said, My master does appreciate my good work, for now I am a foreman. See, he does trust my marketing to me, and he is also sending for my family. Work is helping me to recover from my troubles. Someday it will help me to buy my freedom from and once more on a farm of my own. Time went on, and Nana said become more and more anxious for me to return from selling. He would be waiting He would be waiting when I returned and would eagerly count and divide our money. He would also urge me to seek further market and increase my sales. Often I went outside the city gates to solicit the overseers of the slaves. Building the walls, I hated to return to disagreeable side from, but found the overseers liberal buyers. One day I was surprised to see Jabado waiting in line to fill his basket with bricks. He was gaunt and bent, and his back was covered with welts and sores from the whips of the overseers. I was sorry for him and handed him a cake which he crushed into his mouth and like a hungry animal. Seeing the greedy looks in his eyes, I ran before he could grab my tray. Why thou work so hard? Arad Gula said to me once day, almost the same question thou asked of me today. Thou remember, I told him that Medicto had said about work and how it was proving to be my best friend. I showed him with pride my wallet of pennies, and explained how I was saving them to buy my freedom. When thou art free, what will thou do? He inquired. Then I answered, I intend to become a merchant. And at last he confided in me. Sometime I had never suspected. Thou knowest not that I also am a slave. I am in partnership with my master. Stop, demanded Rangula. I will not listen to his lies defaming my grandfather. He was no slave. His eyes blazed in anger. Sarunada remained calm. I honor him for rising above his misfortune and becoming a leading citizen of Damascus. Art thou his grandson cast of the sun mold? Art thou man enough to face true facts, or thou prefer to live under false illusions? Harad- Hadangula straightened in his saddle. In a voice suppressed with deep emotion, he replied, my grandfather was beloved by all. Countless were his good deeds. When the famine came, did not his gold buy grain in Egypt, and did not his caravan bring to it Damascus and distribute it to the people, so none would starve? Now thou sayest he was but a despised slave in Babylon. Had he remained a slave in Babylon, then he might well have been despised. But when, through his own efforts, he became a great man in Damascus, the gods indeed contented his misfortunes and honored him with their respect. Sarunada replied, after telling me that he was a slave. Sarunada continued, he explained how anxious he had been to earn his freedom. Now that he had enough money to buy this, he was much disturbed as to what he should do. He was no longer making good sales and feared to leave the support of his masters. I protested his indecision. Cling no longer than thy master. Get once again the feeling of being free, a man. Act like a free man and succeed like one. Then decide what thou desirest to accomplish, and then work will aid thy to achieve it. He went he went on his way, saying he was glad I had saved him for his cowardice. Saved him for his cowardice. One day I went outside the gates again and was surprised to find a great crowd gathering there. When I asked a free asked a man for explanation. He replied, "Thou hast not heard. An escaped slave who murdered one of the king's guard has been brought to justice, and will this day to be flogged to death for his crime. Even the king himself is to be here." So dense was the crowd about flogging post, I feared to go near lest my tray honey cakes be upset. Therefore, climbed up the unfinished wall to see over the heads of the people. I was fortunate in having a view of Nebuchadnezzar himself as he rode by his garden and in his golden chariot. Never I had beheld such grandeur, such robes and hangings of gold cloth and velvet. I could not see the flogging, though I could hear the shrieks of the poor slaves. I wondered how one so noble as our handsome king could endure to see such suffering. Yet, when I saw he was laughing and joking with his nobles, I knew he was cruel and understood why such inhuman tasks were demanded of the slaves building the walls. After the slave was dead, his body was hung upon a pole by a rope attached to his legs so all his might see. As the crowd began to thin, I went close. On the hairy chest I saw tattooed two intertwined serpents. It was Pirate. The next time I met Aratgula, he was a changed man, full of enthusiasm. He greeted me. "Behold, the slave newest of is now a free man." There was magic in thy words. Already my sales and my profits are increasing. My wife is overjoyed. She was a free woman, the niece of my master. She much desires that we move to a strange city where no man shall know I was once a slave. Thus our children shall be our reproach for their father's misfortune. Work has become my best helper. It has enabled me to recapture my confidence and my skill to sell. I was overjoyed. I was overjoyed that I had been able, even in a small way, to repay him for the encouragement he had given me. One evening, Swasti came to me in a deep distress. "Thy master is in trouble. I fear for him. Some months ago he lost much of the gaming tables. He pays not the farmer for his grains nor his honey. He pays not the money lenders. They are angry and threaten him. Why should we worry over his folly? We are not his keepers," I replied thoughtlessly. "Foolish youth, thou understandest not. To the moneylender didn't he give thy little the title to secure a loan? Under the law he can claim thee and sell thee. I know not what to do. He is a good master. Why? Oh why should such trouble come upon him?" Note was Swasti's fear groundless. While I was doing the baking next morning, the money lenders returned with a man he called Sasi. This man looked me over and said I would do. The money lender waited not for my master to return but took Swasti to tell him he had taken me, with only the robe on my back and the purse of pennies hanging safely from my belt. I was hurried away from the unfinished baking. I was whirled away from my dearest hopes as the hurricane snatched the free from the forest and cast it into the surging sea. Again, a gaming house and barley beer had caused me disaster. Sasi was a blunt, gruff man. As he led me across the city, I told him of the good work I had been doing for Nana Ned and said I have to do good work for him. He replied, offered no encouragement. I like not work. I like not this work. My master likes it not. The king has told him to send to build a section of a grand canal. Master tells Sasi to buy more slaves and work hard and finish quick. Bah, how can any man finish a big job quick? Picture a desert with not a tree, just low shrubs and sun burning with such fury. The water in our barrels became so hot we could scarcely drink it. Then picture rows of men going down into the deep excavation and lugging heavy basket in of dirt upshore. Dusty trails from daylight until dark. Picture food served in upon through from which he helped ourselves like swine. We had no tents, no straws for food, for bed. That was the situation in which I found myself. I buried my wallet in a marked spot, wondering if I would ever dig it up again. At first, I worked with good will, but as the month dragged on, I felt my spirit breaking. Then uh, heat fever took hold of my weary body. I lost my appetite and could scarcely eat the mutton and vegetables. At night, I would toss in an unhappy wakefulness. In my misery, I wondered if Jabado had not the best plan, and to shirk and keep his back from being broken to in work. Then I recalled my last sight of him and knew his plan was not good. I thought of Pirate with his bitterness and wondered if it might be just as well as to fight and kill. The memory of his bleeding body reminded me that his plan was also useless. Then I remembered my last sight of Medicdo. His hands were deeply calloused from hard work, but his heart was light and there was happiness on his face. His was the best plan. Yet I was just as willing to work as Medic, though he could not have worked harder than I. Why did not my work bring me happiness and success? Was it work that brought Medicdo happiness, or was happiness and success merely in the laps of the gods? Was I to work the rest of my life without gaining my desires, without happiness and success? All of these questions were jumbled in my mind and I had no answer. Indeed, I was sorely confused. Several days later, when I seemed that I was at the end of my endurance and my questions still unanswered, Sasi sent for me. A messenger had come from my master to take me back to Babylon. I dug up my precious wallet, wrapped myself in a tattered remnants of my robe, and was on my way. As we rode, the same thoughts of a hurricane whirling me hither and thither kept racing through my feverish brain. I seemed to be living the weird words of a chant from my native town of Harun, besetting a man like a whirlwind, driving him like a storm, whose course no one can follow, yet whose destiny no one can foretell. Was I destined to be ever thus punished for I knew not what new miseries and disappointments awaited me? When I when we rode to the courtyard of my master's house, imagine my surprise when I saw Aratgula awaiting me. He held me down and hugged me like a long lost brother. As we went our way, I would have followed him as a slave should follow his master, but he would not permit me. He put his arm about me, saying, I hunted everywhere for thee. When I had almost given up hope, I did meet Swasti, who told me of the moneylender who directed me to thy noble honor. A hard bargain he did drive and made me to pay an outrageous price. But thou art worth it. Thy philosophy and thy enterprise have been my inspiration to this new success. Medicdo's philosophy, not mine, I interrupted. Medicdo's and thine. Thanks to thee both, we are going to Damascus. I need thee for my partner. See, he exclaimed. In a moment thou wilt be a free man. So saying, he drew from beneath his robe the clay tablet carrying my title. This he raised above his head and hurled it to break in 100 pieces upon the cobblestone. With glee, he stamped upon the fragments until they were but dust. Tears of gratitude filled my eyes. I knew it was the luckiest man in Babylon. Work thou see by this in the time of my greatest distress didst prove to be my best friend. My willingness to work enabled me to escape from being sold to join the slave gangs upon the walls. It also so impressed thy grandfather he selected me for his partner. Then Hadangula questioned, was work my grandfather's secret to the golden shackles? It was the only key he had when I first knew him. Sarru Nada replied, thy grandfather enjoyed working. The guy god appreciated his effort and rewarded him liberally. I began to see Hadangula was speaking thoughtfully. Work attracted his many friends who admired his industry and the success it brought. Work brought him the honors he enjoyed so much in Damascus. Work brought him all those things I have approved, and I thought work was fit only for slaves. Life is rich with many pleasures for men to enjoy. Sarru Nada commented, Each has its place. I am glad that work is not reserved for slaves. Were that the case, I would be deprived of my greatest pleasures. Many things do I enjoy, but nothing takes the place of work. Sarunada, Sarunada and Adangula rode in the shadows of the towering walls up to the massive gates of Babylon. At their approach, the gates guarded jumped to attention and respectfully saluted an honored citizen. With head held high, Sarunada led the long caravan through the gates and up to street of the city. I have always hoped to be a man like my grandfather, Hatangula confided to him. Never before did I realize just what kind of man he was. Thou, this thou hast shown me. Now that I understand, I do admire him all the more and feel more determined to be like him. I fear I can never repay thee for giving me the true key to his success. From this day forth, I shall use his key. I shall start humbly as he started, which befits my true station far better than jewels and fine robes. So saying, Hadangula pulled away the jeweled baubles from his ears and the rings from his fingers. Then, reining his horse, he dropped back and rode with deep respect behind the leader of the caravan.